Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about, lots going on in Washington, D.C. Congress, a little active, some activity going on in the nation's capital. 35 arrested in front of the Supreme Court building today. 17 members of Congress among those arrested, according to the Capitol Police. AOC, one of them. I guess you had Ilhan Omar, and Presley, all of the squad folks, Cori Bush, them. You had Andy Levin from Michigan, Jackie Spirey, Alma Adams, Carolyn Maloney. Had a bunch of folks saying, hey, that thing you did, Supreme Court, overturning that thing that's important to us, we're not happy about it. Now, where they should be and where they need to be in Congress getting this passed, we need to be mobilizing, energizing, activating, engaging, educating, go down the list of all the things we need to be doing to get voters to the polls in November, to get people who are going to say, you know what, we respect a woman's right to choose. We expect people to have the right to privacy. We don't want an overreaching, overburdensome, overpowerful government. And this is something conservatives used to believe in. We don't want government in our lives. Isn't that what they told us? Well, this is what they have done. So you have these members of Congress who were arrested, and some of the interesting things, and this is one of those, that I kind of agree with. If you're arrested, they usually drag you downtown. They make you go through all the fingerprinting, make you go through the picture stuff. No, they just moved him off to the side, issued a ticket, and went on about the day. Again, interesting. I'm of the mindset we pack the jails, we pack things up, we pack up the court systems, and we do what needs to be done to make this the issue front and center. If it's that important. And I think that it is. I think this is one of those moments where this is an important issue. Now, Democrats are doing what they need to be doing, also in Congress. I do find it interesting that they did pursue a vote to codify same-sex marriage and interracial marriage. The vote on the bill Respect for Marriage Act in the House ended up getting, 347, 340 some members of Congress voted for it. Actually 267 to 157. 47 Republicans voted with all of the Democrats. Surprisingly and shockingly, and I give credit where credit is due, my Congressman Scott Perry, who I do not like, will not vote for. He has done virtually nothing that I agree with. He did support the Respect for Marriage Act. So on this, I give him the credit that he deserves for being on the right side of this issue. But sorry, Scott, no pardon for you. Still, want you held accountable. Would love to see you fitted with a nice set of bracelets, a nice jumpsuit, a nice new home with no view. That I would like to see. But on this, good on you for standing up for marriage equality. And this is one of those things where you go, we should be doing more of this. In fact, on Wednesday, there's a scheduled vote on the Right to Contraception Act. This would protect a person's ability to access contraceptives and to engage in contraception. This is what it says, and to protect a healthcare provider's ability to provide contraception, contraceptives, and information related to contraception. Eventually, it's going to get to the point where even talking about birth control could get you landed in jail. I'm expecting that down the road. But they're pushing for a vote. And this is, again, what has to happen. Because understand, as I've been saying for a very long time, our friends on the Republican side of the aisle hate working families, and these are working family issues. These are important issues. And this is a moment This is an important moment. Democrats need to understand this. They need to go issue after issue after issue. Collective bargaining should be on the table. We should be going, you know what? Which side of this issue are you on? The right to health care, which side of this issue are you on? Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all down the list. We should have votes. They should be plain, they should be simple, and they should be simply to go, which side are you on? Which side of the 20th century are you on? Are you on the side of moving forward with what we've built in the 20th century, or going backwards, moving us back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s and not the 1980s and 90s? This is important because far too many of our friends on the extreme right, they want to return us back to the days of the Stone Age. This not good. Not good for workers, not good for families, not good for anyone but the upper echelon, the well-to-do, the well-connected, the well-heeled, of which most of us are not. And this is that moment. This is that moment where Democrats do what Republicans are going to do to you after November if they get a hold of the House. Use the power of hearings, use the power of investigations, use the power of the vote. Nail people down. Look, I've got union brothers and sisters who tell me, no, Democrats are worse for union members than Republicans are. There are actually union members who believe that Republicans care about them. There are actually working people who go, no, the Republicans, they care about us. They gave us those tax cuts for about 6 minutes. They say nice words to us. They give us words. But yet all down the line, you look at the heavily Republican states. Higher poverty rates, less health insurance rates, lower retirement security, deadlier workplaces, lower wages, lower benefits, all down the line. Worse standard of living, higher death rates, higher infant mortality rates. All of the negatives in red states go up, and the things that as a society I think we want to think are good things all go down. And you go, how is that? Well, bad policy. It's policy that does this. There's no invisible market hand. There's no invisible thing that's making things better. Smart policy, sound investment. And in places that do that, in places that, like I say, you want to change the world, change your little corner of it. In places that do that actively, people have better standards of living. In places that go, no, we're going to allow the will of the market to decide. Well, not so great. Also, another vote I found interesting. This was the one that had 394 votes. Purely a symbolic vote in the House. And look, the House does this a lot. There are a lot of those symbolic votes that I think are important, and this being one of them. 394 members of the House, both Democrats and Republicans, voted to support Finland and Sweden entering into NATO. Now understand, the House has no power in this whatsoever. Purely a symbolic vote. That responsibility is in the Senate, and we'll see how the Republicans react in the Senate. But you had 18 Republicans who were against the idea of Finland and Sweden entering into NATO, and we know who they are. They're the crazy caucus. And I'll be honest, I really thought there'd be more than 18. Only 18 crazy, far out, extreme Republicans. You know the ones. The Andy Biggs, the Dan Bishops, the Lauren Boeberts. Gun Fetish Barbie had to be there. Madison Cawthorn, Ben Klein, Michael Cloud, Warren Davidson from Ohio, Matt Gaetz still trying to keep himself out of jail in Florida, Bob Good not doing such a great job, Marjorie Trader Green, Morgan Griffith, Thomas Massey, McClintock from California, Mary Miller from Illinois, Ralph Norman, Rosendale from Montana, who you never hear his name, Chip Roy from Texas, and the former Democrat turned really crazy Republican Jefferson Van Drew. Those are your 18 who said, no, let us side with Russia. I don't know. I don't know if you we'll see how that plays out. But to their narrow base, to the Trumpkins of the world, That's going to maybe raise them some money. I'm sure the Putin money will come in any day now. There were 19 lawmakers, 17 Republicans and 2 Democrats who did not vote. It used to be in the old days that these kind of purely symbolic things they went through with no problem. But here you go. So I'm curious your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. In looking at this, we're in this moment. Which side? Which side are you on the 20th century? What's next? For me, if I'm the Democrats every day until the midterms, I'm bringing up something new. Which side are you on? Which side of history will you be on? And being able to go to the voters and going, look, you think we're bad? You think we're bad? Oh, just wait. Understand, we've gotten nothing done on climate change. We're seeing stories coming out of Europe of runways melting. The Royal Navy can't get off the ground at its largest Air Force base because the runway is literally melting. And yet we can't seem to go, yeah, something needs to be done. Now, there was talk of President Biden declaring a state of emergency this week on climate change. That has not happened. They're kind of pulling back on that. They're holding off, I guess. I guess there are some things that they can do, but not a lot without Congress. I did find the quote from Joe Manchin hysterical because he said on ABC News, quoted by ABC News, when asked if he was supportive of President Biden declaring a national climate emergency, he said, well, let's see what Congress does. The Congress needs to act. The Congress needs to act, he says. The Congress needs to act, says a member, that's right, a member of Congress. Our esteemed senator from West Virginia is the guy who's been Lucying this party from the beginning. Yeah, I support it. Oh, yeah, I'm going to do something. And at the last second, no, we're not going to do anything. Now, what's interesting, as is being reported, a majority in all but 3 states in this country believe Congress should do something. A majority of people, of you, me, all of us, a majority say, hey, we should act. Those 3 states, one of them just happens to be West Virginia. Because understand, so focused on all we have is the coal. They're going to take the coal and they're going to give us nothing. And I've seen this firsthand myself. When we did our labor history tour back in 2013, we were going to the site where the Battle of Blair Mountain happened. And at the time, the coal companies were literally trying to remove the mountain. They had removed everything else. There was no town left. There was no infrastructure left. A place where 1 million shots were fired in this war on workers. And there was nothing left. They, at that time, wanted to do away with the mountain. When we showed up, there were probably 30, 35 people who just surrounded us out of nowhere. I mean, we were literally dropped in the middle of nowhere. All you could see were trees for as far as the eye could see. And yet at this point, in all directions came carloads of people with their Friends of Coal hats and their Friends of Coal T-shirts and their big giant belt buckles and their hats. Oh, and don't forget the large sidearms. And they were there, what you doing around here kind of thing. And it came down to they thought we were there to badmouth coal. We're gonna take their coal. And what was interesting is at the time, the guys who were there, who had the big guns and the big hats and the big belt buckles, they were actually working for the companies who were just screwing them, trying to screw them out of their pensions and out of their health care. And, when you started talking about that, going, explain to me why you're out here attempting to threaten and intimidate me when all I want to talk about is history, when you're being literally robbed blind right to your face, and you're still fighting for the people who are robbing you. It's quite amazing. Quite remarkable stuff. Let's quick go to the phone lines. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are we today?
We're doing fine. What I wanted to say was, okay, fine. So we had the vote in the House on the marriage equality or what have you. I can't recall the precise wording. But do we really think that's going to pass in the Senate?
No.
I mean...
No, but this is the reason this is important, Alice, and this is where I go with this. And these votes are really important, is to get them on the record so that when you go into the elections, you can point to the reality, because we're looking for the 5 to 10% of voters who know nothing. They don't pay attention. They're not engaged. They're not informed. You want to be able to go to them and go, here, this is who the other side is. There's too many people are saying there's no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. These votes are an opportunity to go, here, this is the difference. Do you believe in the rights of women to choose their course in life, what they do with their body? Do you believe in the rights of people to be able to choose how many children they're going to have with contraception? Do you believe that families should be able to do what they're going to do with regards to whatever? Do you think workers should have rights? Consumers should have rights? We should be banging these votes out to go, these are the differences. This is what makes us Democrats. This is what makes them Republicans. And go from there. I know none of this is going to actually become law or even matter, because the Supreme Court will just shoot it down anyway. But this is why you have to have people informed, educated, engaged. At least that's my thought.
Well, that's true. And I understand that. My whole thing, I think what I want to get to is I think that we may be a little bit past saving anything. And even looking at the climate change, the way it's accelerating, you know, I'm at the point going, okay, if we're going to have the meteor come and just finish it all off, you know, let's do it now instead of dragging this out. But, yeah, you're right. People need to pay attention. Unfortunately, that 10% that we're talking about, a lot of them get their news on Facebook. So, you know, education, yeah, is definitely a must.
And that's where Democrats need to get better at messaging, and they need to start putting out their messages in those places. They need to be fighting in those places. And that's the problem with Democrats. They don't do that. They haven't done it. They gave up the talk radio space years ago. They gave up the cable news space years ago. They've given up almost on the internet. They got to get out there. And this is where Gavin Newsom is right. They got to do a much better job of communicating.
Exactly. Time to fight. But you have a good evening.
Thank you, Alice. Appreciate it. To me, that simple. Got to do a better job. Got to do a better job. Love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about the January 6th committee hearing. Might not be the final one. After all, there might be more to come. Also, your thoughts, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You miss any of the program or any of our programs, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you will find ours. Always there, always available. Or just go to thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So interesting story today that evidently there's a 48-page internal group of emails from the Department of Defense that Insider.com got a hold of how military leaders were monitoring the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And again, you know, had this gone just a little bit more awry, it would have been our military who would have had to decide, do you come in and throw Trump out? Do you stand by and stand back and stand down and allow Trump to continue and hope the courts deal with it and him not leaving? Interesting kind of bit of theory. Now, I do have some hope that General Milley would have done the right thing, but I don't know that he would have been. I don't know that he would have had many people behind him. It's one of those things. Glad we didn't have to find out. Also, we're finding out the January 6th committee is extending the inquiry. They wanted to wrap up, I guess, by September was the goal. But evidently, there's just stuff that just keeps coming in. With the very best people, especially with Cassidy Hutchinson, and now with coming up this Thursday, the big hearing coming. Evidently, a lot more of the rats are jumping ship. Now, remember, I don't view any of these people as heroes. I don't view them particularly as brave. I think these are people who just want to keep their you-know-whats out of jail. They want to keep their things out of a sling, so to speak. And they're coming forward saying, this is what I know, this is what happened, and obviously painting themselves in a better light, which you have to understand that that's going to happen to keep themselves out of jail. But we're going to see how this goes on. Now, all the TV networks have agreed. I guess ABC, NBC, CBS, they're going to preempt all of their normal programming. Fox evidently says the hearings will be available to affiliates in the event that they wish to televise them in their markets. This is their way of saying, well, maybe, or maybe we're just going to air our normal propaganda and nonsense. Yeah, that's kind of where it's at. Also, Benny Thompson, not going to be front and center, evidently has COVID, but he will be there via the Zoom, Skype, the video conferencing, whatever. The hearings, though, Thursday are going to be led by Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger and Democratic Representative Elaine Lurie. That will be interesting to see where they go to wrap this, because the thought was this was going to be the grand finale. This was going to be the wrap up, and I'm still kind of being told maybe could be explosive. Looking forward to it. What I was hoping is to get a hold of the texts from our Secret Service. Evidently, according to the January 6th committee, the Secret Service has failed to deliver those texts. And I'll tell you right now, I don't believe they've failed. I believe they chose not to. Because, well, it's easier to take a beating. They're saying, oh, well, we just couldn't find them. Oh, hey, they got accidentally deleted. Oh, it's some screw up. It's easier to look inept and take the beating for being inept than for going, okay, here it is. Here's how bad it really was. So I think this is interesting, and it's a question that the Biden administration has to start thinking about. How secure is our president, given the fact that our Secret Service, wow, so deep in the bag for the former guy that they're going to erase text messages? Because I don't buy for a second that they just, oops, we lost them. Not buying it at all. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, podcast, get that at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your favorite podcast. Wherever you get yours, you'll find ours. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day San Francisco's Central Labor Council voted narrowly to end the general strike, then in its fourth day. It had been one of 3 historic strikes that turned the tide towards industrial organizing in the 1930s. It emerged as part of the ongoing longshoremen strike, which started in May. The decision was controversial. Longshoremen and seamen raged that leadership of the strike had been torn from them by more conservative elements. As author of Workers on the Waterfront, Bruce Nelson puts it, after 2.5 months on strike, literally thousands of arrests, at least 6 deaths, and hundreds of serious injuries, the men and their families were holding the line. But their allies were gradually cutting the ties of solidarity that had been the strike's lifeblood. the shipping bosses forced a vote for arbitration from the longshoremen and without the seamen. As Nelson notes, this served to drive a wedge between the two unions, creating a rift that would only deepen. The two would continue to strike until the end of July, but the strike left the longshoremen emboldened. They pushed back on the job, driving off scabs and establishing work rules and conditions ahead of the arbitrator's ruling, which came in October. The hiring hall was finally established. While it was decided that the union and the shipping bosses would rule the hall jointly, the union controlled the position of dispatcher. This meant that the union determined hiring, which put an end to the despised shape-up. The award also mandated wage raises and a coast-wide contract. It would serve as a catalyst for the founding of the ILWU 3 years later.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Although we haven't even gotten through this year's midterm congressional elections, it's still not too early to start examining some of the characters who hope you will make them president in 2024. I know you don't want to, but we must. That's because corporate elites have already chosen their favorites, and they intend to use massive sums of money, lies, more money, PR slickum, and even more money to slide their toady into the Oval Office, hoping you don't discover until it's too late that their chosen one really is a toad. Take Ron DeSantis. The GOP's far-right, power-hungry, narcissistic Florida governor promises to be the next Donald Trump, only more effective and not as nice. For example, his favorite gubernatorial hobby is the Orwellian practice of monitoring and censoring people's speech and thoughts, culling out ideas he deems objectionable. Don't Say Gay is his most infamous dictate to the state's teachers, but he has also outlawed any teachings that might, quote, denigrate the Founding Fathers. Nor will he tolerate the study of institutional racism in America. Indeed, he has even mandated that social studies textbooks, get this, must not include concepts of social justice. Ron adamantly opposes what right-wingers call a woke society. He wants one that's asleep, sound asleep. He recently rallied his right-wing cadre to ban some math textbooks. Yes, math. They screeched that some real-life topics like wage disparities are being used to make math problems relevant to today's students. So it was Fahrenheit 451 for those books. Thus far, DeSantis' censorship binge has nixed 42 math books for, quote, incorporating prohibited topics. This is Jim Hightower saying, did I mention that DeSantis is also forming his own gubernatorial military force? A state army he can deploy in emergencies. What's an emergency? He says he'll decide.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is interesting. You know, I just brought up General Milley a second ago, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And what has happened is, I guess he's ordered his staff to gather information about interactions between the U.S. military and the Chinese military over the last 5 years. To review any of the interactions that have gone on with the Chinese military in the South China Sea and beyond. This kind of interesting, and it kind of got me questioning, you know, I've got questions here to answer. Maybe some of them, if he's got thoughts on if this is important or not. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is great to be with you as always.
So I saw this story, and I'm looking through it, and I'm going, you know, I think we should have some guidelines. We should know who's talking to who and who's making deals with who on both sides of this, since a lot of money flows around, a lot of influence throws around, especially when I look at General Flynn. I got questions. Is this a deal? Is this a big deal? Something I should be concerned about? Thoughts?
Yeah, Rick, this is a great question, and it's unfortunate that we have to ask it, right? Yeah, I mean, that's one place where you want to count on fidelity, I think, at the highest ranks of our military over the last few years. and so we'll see what comes out of this. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a top secret clearance. You don't have a top secret clearance, and so we'll see kind of where this investigation leads. But it does kind of like unwrap a couple of key concerns here. One is the sophistication of China's intelligence and counterintelligence in the United States, geared at U.S. institutions and individuals, and certainly keeping track of dissidents and critics as well of the regime. And doing this through physical means as well as through cyber means, has some of the most sophisticated capabilities around the world.
Yeah.
And we don't, we hear about the Russians and all of this, but the Chinese are major players in all of this, and so I think that's important. And you raised up the kind of like the military, I guess conflict or collaboration or whatever is going on, but I think this is important because it's clear the Chinese military itself is wanting to exert more dominance over a larger amount of area that goes outside of basically Chinese sea lanes or airspace or what have you, and that could lead to potentially deadly, catastrophic encounters that could have much graver consequences down the road. So it is very important to get a handle on all of this.
No, and look, at the end of this, and I just had this conversation last night with a friend, I look at manufacturing, the stuff that you do is the focus on reshoring manufacturing, bringing jobs back, increasing our ability to produce domestically for domestic consumption. I view manufacturing as a national security issue. First and foremost, this is, it's that simple. Manufacturing is a national security issue, especially when we're looking at China, because we've basically given them our manufacturing capacity. And are we now not surprised that we're dependent on them, especially in times of pandemic and crisis? And you guys literally wrote the book back in 2013 of all of our dependence, and it's only gotten worse from 2013. Have you guys ever thought of redoing that and saying it was bad back in 2013 and now it's even worse? Because look, I think the average person doesn't really realize just how dependent we are.
Yeah, it first of all, thank you, Rick. We literally did write the book, as you mentioned, back in 2013, the big thick book. I know you have a copy of it. What I guess gives us a little bit of solace right now is that there are a lot of organizations, including the federal government, that are doing these assessments now, in part so we don't have to, right? And so I'd much rather have federal agencies looking at this, which they have been in the Biden administration, this comprehensive supply chain review that was 1,400 pages, makes ours look like a little kid's book, basically. And so I'm glad that they're exploring it. But I think you're right. I don't know that the average citizen knows just how dependent we are. Like, for instance, for our solar energy future, basically 90% of the stuff that we, installed in the United States is of Chinese origin, directly or indirectly. That's probably quite shocking to people. No. Or the lithium that goes into lithium-ion batteries, and how much of that is processed in China, which is the vast majority, like 70%. And so we do have to open more eyes, I think. But I do think, and clearly our work was a modest contribution to that. But I think over the last couple of years, and the pandemic brought this into focus as well, right? That I think there's at least among our policymakers, a greater understanding of some of the vulnerabilities that we have as a country. But and I'll just close with this thought on this question. One of the major obstacles, Rick, to all of this is the big global companies who don't care And they look at the Chinese market and they're like, you know what, we're happy to have you as partners because we're going to make a ton of bank here.
It's all about the money.
Yeah, and if we're mortgaging our innovation or our security, that's something that's not of grave concern.
No, and you're right. I mean, it's the
many
short term.
problems.
It's their short term thinking. The next quarter,
right.
how much they can put in their pocket, as opposed to the Chinese who are thinking, 5, 25, 100 years into the future. But I keep this book near my desk. It's Remaking American Security: Supply Chain Vulnerabilities and National Security Risks Across the U.S. Defense Industrial Base. This is literally 350 pages of all the things that we're not doing. In fact, one of the things you talk about in this book, I just looked it up, is our vaccines. The fact that there's you have a policy in there that was seemed quite clairvoyant, that we needed to invest in 2013 to deal with what ended up happening in 2020.
Yeah, that's totally true. Is that a lot of our active pharmaceutical ingredients and other pharmaceutical related products are sourced from China. We expose that. We expose semiconductors, which obviously is a hot topic right now, and lithium-ion batteries and a lot of that stuff. And it's just like, I wish that, I think our failing, I guess, in a way, is that we didn't move the needle then. I think we raised the issues up and people were like, oh, that's great. But unfortunately, and this, that we wait until there's a crisis to respond, and then it's more costly. Our options aren't as good, and our outcomes aren't as good as well. And so, hopefully, we can continue to raise up some of these issues, and people will listen to us, because we're not Chicken Little here. Everything that we said in that report has basically been borne out, and is proven to be an extraordinary vulnerability.
No, you bring up the semiconductors, and in fact, again, in the report, important part of the report, and yet we still can't get the CHIPS Act passed, which you've got Mitch McConnell and them trying to hold that hostage so that they can keep drug prices high, while investment in that plant in Columbus that's supposed to be helpful, investment in plants across this country that would get us less dependent on China, less dependent on foreign companies, just languishes. And this, again, I come back to that basic premise that I have said all 17 years doing this: manufacturing is a national security issue. If we're not making stuff, we're dependent. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I'm going to suggest on semiconductors, there is a glimmer of hope here, because I saw kind of late breaking news that the CHIPS Act survived a procedural vote, got 64 votes to advance. That's not final passage, but as in the Senate, if you get 60 votes, you're golden, right? And so that was a good start. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the good trade stuff that had been in there in the House of Representatives is not in there right now, and so we'll have to go back and take care of that. But I do think that there's at least this understanding. And I also, and I'm trying to think of the way to put this, because I don't support everything the semiconductor industry does. I think that they invest too much in China. All these companies who are going to benefit from this also invest in China. That's kind of, unfortunately, their market reality. But I will say, and I will give them this industry credit, that as an industry, they realized they needed to invest in American manufacturing. And they needed to build new factories. And those factories are extraordinarily expensive. And governments all around the world are paying for these things. And so we're kind of the last holdout there. And so for this industry to say, you know what, we want to partner with the government, we want to do this, and we're going to scale up semiconductor manufacturing to get us, approaching the market share that we had 3 decades ago, is a pretty important development.
Yeah, but Scott, don't you think at some point radical self-interest has to play here? Because there's a reality that we may not be the global superpower to protect their intellectual property rights, to protect them on any level. There's got to be a moment of awakening that, what we came to believe as the baseline is no longer going to be the baseline of privacy, of corporate rights, of patent rights. That's no longer the baseline. The Chinese are going to set that, the Chinese government, and they're going to steal it.
That's right. You nailed it. I think that's the problem, is that, if they're banking on China, they know eventually a company, a national company, is going to take over that market, right? They're just essentially a placeholder that's going to funnel in innovation and investment into China, and the government or a big company in China is going to take that over, number one. And number two, and here's the other thing about the semiconductor industry, what's not based in China is based in Taiwan. And Taiwan is an ally, is a partner, but Taiwan could well be caught up in a conflict, a major conflict like Russia-Ukraine, right, with China. And then what happens to the supplies of semiconductors? So I think the industry, I think you're right. It's a lot of it is enlightened self-interest. And when most of their customer base, we consume like 20% at least of the world's semiconductors, and we make 11 or 12% of them. So when your customer base is here, it does make sense to locate production here. And they're a little late to that game, but what, better late than never. And the factory announcements that have been made by Texas Instruments, Intel, Global Foundries, TMSC, Applied, AMD, all these companies. This is a big deal for the ecosystem in the United States and building it back up.
Yeah. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. If you want to take a look at the work that they do, by all means, we'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. I wanted to get your thought on this Leveling the Playing Field Act, this competitive and innovation legislation that is going on right now, that you guys are running a program around, a campaign around to get the Senate to support. Tell me a little bit about what this is.
Yeah, so I mentioned that the competitiveness bill, which has been dramatically scaled down, just survived a test vote in the Senate. One of the things that's left out of there that we'd like to see get back in are trade provisions, and the reason why is this: you can invest all that you want in American industry, and I think that's a good thing. But unless you have a level playing field, unless you have trade enforcement mechanisms, the imports are just going to swamp all of these efforts, subsidized or dumped imports. And so giving our policymakers, giving our trade ambassador more tools to fight against unfair trade practices, I think, is very important. And so that's why we're calling on Congress to include this legislation that is bipartisan. Sherrod Brown, Rob Portman from Ohio, two of the key authors in the Senate, to include this, and hopefully we can make it in this package. If not, we still have, and I think there's still an appetite to address China competition writ large beyond semiconductors. Maybe there will be an avenue for it, but this is something that we got to get done.
So how do people participate in this? What are we asking folks?
Yeah, so go to AmericanManufacturing.org. You can just click on the Take Action, and then it will tell you, based on your zip code or your state, whose office to call, and just pitch in a call. I know that we've heard from a bunch of our advocates that they've talked directly with Senate offices and have expressed their point of view on this. And over the course of this campaign, Rick, we've had 50,000 folks reach out to Capitol Hill, and so we'd love to have more join them. And of course, now is the time, because we're at the critical hour on this legislation.
Finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on the climate bill. It looks like Joe Manchin has loosied the Democratic Party once again. I know he's still playing footsie, saying, "Oh no, we're going to do something." I don't see him doing anything. This is killing the solar industry, isn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly not helpful right now. I'm going to have to borrow your lucid expression. I like that to describe kind of what he's been doing. And just to take the sports analogy a little bit further, this is just this is an unforced error, because we're scaling up solar deployment so much in the United States, and what it means that the climate package didn't pass. It had a lot of manufacturing tax incentives in it and other types of incentives for clean energy manufacturing in the United States, is that we'll simply be replacing that oil from Saudi Arabia or elsewhere with solar panels from China. And we'll be missing out on the manufacturing. And again,
and the jobs.
And the jobs and the innovation and all of that. And already you've seen one of the biggest solar manufacturers in the United States, First Solar, say that we're not going to locate another factory in the United States. It's just that, that's not where the investment is telling us to go. And so it is hugely problematic. I mean, there's a company in Georgia that just broke ground on a new facility, and they're probably wondering if they're going to have a market for it because it's otherwise going to be swamped by imports. So we got to get this done. And again, if it's not going to happen now, it needs to happen after Labor Day when they come back.
It needs to happen soon. And look, while I beat up on Joe Manchin, there are also 50 Republicans who voted against this.
100% right. 100% right, Rick. It's going to take, every Democrat. There should be bipartisan support for this. There's so much clean energy in red states, Texas and Georgia, and states like that, that there ought to be support for these types of tax incentives to make sure that we have the jobs here, the innovation here, the manufacturing here, as well as the clean energy, the other renewable benefits here as well.
It's an absolute shame. But Scott, I appreciate you taking time for us. Hopefully check out the website, AmericanManufacturing.org. We'll get links out so you can participate in the campaign to get that Leveling the Playing Field Act moved forward. The CHIPS Act, also make sure we're calling our senators on that as well. But Scott, I appreciate the time.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rick. Have a great evening.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Your thoughts, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1993. That was the day that President Bill Clinton announced his Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. He had campaigned for president, promising to allow all citizens to serve in the military, regardless of sexual orientation. Once he was elected, there was a great deal of opposition to his proposal. Military officials railed against the idea of lifting the ban on homosexuals in the military. Members of Congress and the public voiced opposition. President Clinton proposed a compromise he called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This meant that military officials were not supposed to inquire about the sexual orientation of servicemen and women. Service members were not to be public about their sexual preference. This meant that if members of the LGBT community wanted to pursue a career in the military, they had to hide a significant part of who they were or risk losing their jobs. The policy stood in effect for nearly 2 decades. More than 12,000 officers lost their jobs because they refused to stay in the closet. It is also unknown how many more LGBT people decided not to apply for military service because of the discriminatory division. President Obama pledged to repeal the policy during his first election. It took 2 years after his election until Don't Ask, Don't Tell was finally ended by Congress. Some members of Congress issued dire warnings about repealing the discriminatory policy. But on the 5th anniversary of the repeal, President Obama issued this statement: "Today, Americans can serve the country they love, no matter who they love. And openly gay, lesbian, and bisexual men and women in uniform make our military stronger and America safer."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I go back to it. Manufacturing is a national security issue. And that's again, something we can all, I don't think that's controversial. I think we can all agree on it. We should be making things here in this country. All of the things we need, we should be making, especially those things that we need for national security. For me, it's that simple. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Joe on line 1. Joe, how are you today? Joe, did you fall asleep? I think we lost Joe. Anyway, as I said, I think this is a national security issue. I think it's one of those things that's really important that we make sure that we demand from our friends in Congress that they push policies that are going to make sure that we invest smart policy in this kind of stuff, that we move forward in a way that ensures that we have the jobs and the manufacturing capacity that we need. So let's go to the phones. We got Cal on line 2. Cal, how are we doing today?
Well, first of all, we'll finish off the business. Can you hear me?
Sure, go.
Yeah. We'll finish off the Kavanaugh in his junior year of working at Yale. Remember that go around with me a month ago?
Sure.
Yes. He did get fired after 3 weeks of not showing up for work due to drunkenness.
Yep, I don't doubt it.
Yes. The new thing, my poster from back just late in Trump's reign warned us about all of the plants that he was leaving in different departments. Now it would sound like the EPA is one he didn't plant enough people in, and now they're doing the dirty job. What's the organization where Trump tried to grab the steering wheel and they fought him off?
Oh, the Secret Service.
Yeah, the Secret Service, yes. So now it appears that they were one of the infiltrated entities.
Yeah, are you as concerned as I am about the fact that these messages are deleted, or do you think all, I've had some people go, well, it's probably just embarrassing stuff, like, arranging hookers in different places, like the Secret Service has been known to do, maybe guys who were cheating on their wives using that communication. They didn't want that stuff getting out. I've had people say it's not that they were in the bag for Trump. It's that they were doing all of this other illicit stuff that they were trying to cover up. Do you buy any of that?
Quite possible.
Yeah, I'm of the that's plausible. It's quite plausible.
Yes. That's all I have. No. I'm 87.
Oh, wow.
I'm lucky I made it through this conversation due to memory loss.
I doubt that, Cal. It sounds like your memory's a heck of a lot better than even mine.
One Smith says to another Smith, keep it going.
Good stuff, Cal. Thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate the call.
Bye-bye.
I love that guy. Look, give me 87 of those years. But no, I mean, seriously, on the Secret Service front, there's two ways of looking at this. One is they were totally in the bag for Trump, and they deleted all these messages because they were part of the cover-up. They were part of, and this, again, with the Pence thing, I'm not getting in that car. This kind of makes that, did he know how badly they were on Trump's side and wasn't getting in the car because he had no idea where they were going to ditch him? Or was it the other side of it? There's just a lot of impropriety, a lot of immorality, a lot of goings on that we don't want to shine light on. So we'll just take the hey, they're inept, hey, they're just bad at this. They'll take the beating for mishandling information, but not for what actually happened. Curious your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, make sure you grab the podcast. You can do that at thericksmithshow.com as well.
What we're seeing here indeed is an example of reaping what we've sown.
Simultaneous record deadly heat waves strike across the globe. Last month, tied for the hottest June ever recorded globally. Plus,
people like Manchin are intentionally sabotaging the president's agenda, what the American people want, what a majority of us in the Democratic caucus want.
Senator Joe Manchin again tanks Biden's climate and clean energy agenda.
Tanks for nothing. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You have this kind of heat over major populations, you get a big draw on that electric demand, and it looks like we may have just switched over to generator power. Our lights just went out.
That's right. The lights went out in the middle of the weather forecast warning about power outages on Houston's KTRK. It happened twice.
It did it again?
This is your Green News Report.
Is the AC on, Melanie? That's the important thing right there.
Okay, Desi Doyen, it's hard to not see this as exactly what you and so many climate scientists have been warning about so long as the globe is pretty much just melting down this week.
It sure does seem like it. A persistent, intense, scorching heat wave continues to broil the northern hemisphere with historic new high temperature records across Europe, Asia, and the United States. In China, 1 billion people are suffering under extended record extreme heat and humidity, which is forecast to last through at least mid-August. Portugal hit a new all-time national record high of 117 degrees. In Spain and Portugal, the blistering heat has killed more than 1,000 people. In France, more than 15,000 have been evacuated from raging wildfires. In Italy, heat and drought have decimated a third of rice and corn crops. The UK issued its first ever national heat emergency, with flights and rail service curtailed due to buckling rails and runways. The heat is straining the capacity of emergency services to respond, and the death and disruption are a clear signal that society is not ready for today's climate impact, much less even worse heat events to come as the planet warms.
So it's going really well.
A new study projects that heat-related deaths will triple over coming decades unless governments accelerate climate action. And on top of all that, NASA just announced that June 2022 tied with June 2020 for the hottest June on record globally since record-keeping began in the 1880s, which is extra disturbing because we are currently in a cooling La Niña phase in the Pacific Ocean, which normally cools global temperatures.
So if we were in the middle of El Niño instead, these hot temperatures would be that much hotter.
And an El Niño is coming.
Oh, great.
The unforgiving heat everywhere has laid bare how challenging extreme temperatures will increasingly be in everyday life as man-made global warming increases the frequency, intensity, and duration of these extreme events. Today's extremes were accurately predicted by climate scientists for decades, according to Dr. Michael Mann on CNN.
The impacts of climate change aren't subtle anymore. We're seeing them play out in real time in the form of these unprecedented extreme weather disasters. But what the models do tell us is that if we reduce our carbon emissions to zero, the planet will stop warming up. And when the planet stops warming up, then these other impacts tend to stabilize.
Well, that's a pretty big if, Dr. Mann.
Against that backdrop of weather disasters, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, a millionaire coal baron, has again quashed President Biden's climate and clean energy agenda, this time saying he wants to wait until the economy improves. Even though numerous independent economic analyses confirm that Biden's climate legislation would actually reduce inflation while also preparing the nation for climate impacts that are already costing the U.S. hundreds of billions of dollars a year in damages. Biden said in response he will use every authority as president to enact climate policy through the executive branch, but that approach is vulnerable to legal challenges and the whims of future presidents. Manchin receives more campaign donations from the oil and gas industry than any other politician. In an interview with ABC, independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont excoriated Manchin.
This is an existential threat to humanity. And what this election must be about is whether or not we're going to vote for candidates who are prepared to stand up for working people, stand up for the planet, and have the courage to take on the billionaire class.
Unless more Democrats are elected to the U.S. Senate in November, Manchin's sabotage means the U.S. will be unlikely to meet its Paris Climate Agreement targets, and China's state-subsidized industries will have free rein to further dominate the global clean energy sector.
Manchin will never support anything that lowers carbon emissions because it also lowers the amount of money in his pocket. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So another moment, another episode of Ohio gone crazy. The Ohio State Supreme Court struck down another Republican-drawn congressional map, which probably means, again, not going to have new maps for the election. And this, again, defiance by our Republican friends in Ohio of, hey, we're not going to follow the law and there's nothing you can do to us. That seems to be what they're doing on this front, because the state Supreme Courts keep shooting down their gerrymandered maps, keeps telling them, no, that's not how the law is. And they keep coming back with the same stuff over and over again. And here's the weird part. The maps that the Democrats have proposed still give the Republicans an overwhelming advantage. Republicans want more of an advantage. They want it all. Not just not most of it. They want all of it. And this is what pure power will do for you. Corrupts absolutely. And what do? They do things like, change the 20th century. They do things like take rights away from people. And you have a situation right now in Ohio where a 10-year-old had to go to another state to get an abortion. And they're arguing if that was an opportunity for that 10-year-old to give birth. And I had to have a conversation with my daughter about, could that 10-year-old live through childbirth? I don't know. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on our friends to the West. I've asked Amy Cox to come talk with us. Amy is running for the state house there in the crazy state of Ohio, in the 40th House District. Amy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So, look, everyone knows I grew up in Cleveland. I'm a former Ohioan, born, raised, spent a good portion of my life there. We weren't crazy then. What has happened to the Buckeye State? How doth thou go so nuts?
If I had the answer, I'd be governor right now. But I would say a lot of it has to do with GOP total control for the last at least couple decades at this point in time. So one party rule, this is what you get.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I thought we could agree on, that if a 10-year-old gets raped and is forced into this situation, that we could agree that it's probably not a good thing for a 10-year-old to be forced to have a child. But evidently, we've got a representative in Ohio, Mean Gene Schmidt, who says, hey, if you're raped and you have a child, it's an opportunity. You've got others in Ohio saying, no, that 10-year-old should be forced to give birth. And I don't know that the majority of people in this country are on that side. Why? Why aren't we throwing these bums to the curb?
I think it's people aren't really paying attention and they aren't tuning in. A lot of people live in what we call an information bubble or an information silo, and they get all of their information from a single source. It's played on a lot of TVs when you go into the barbershop or you go into a little pizza house or whatever. It's always the same news. It's right-wing media. And when that's all you consume, it takes a toll. Just like if all you ate was junk food, if all you consume is junk media, and I wouldn't even call it media, it's entertainment, that's a settled case. But they don't know that. And it's frustrating as a teacher to see people in my community that just aren't paying attention. They are simply la-di-da, vote for the Republican.
Yeah, it's pull my team, and this is what I've been saying for years. We've been we've been sucked into this idea that it's about my team. It's right, left. It's Democrat, Republican. It's conservative, liberal. It's, whichever. It's red versus blue. If you bought the hat, that's where you've got to stay. And the reality is it's none of those things in my view. It's always top down, because I look at the abortion issue. I know that wealthy women are going to get the care that they need regardless of what the law says. I know that this is going to affect poor and working class women, especially minorities, overwhelmingly. It's going to affect children. It's going to affect families. It's going to affect working families. And I'm of the mindset that Republicans hate working families. So this is right in line with what their belief structure is. So the question then becomes, you as a candidate, as you're out kissing babies and shaking hands and knocking on doors, what are people throwing at you?
I haven't heard too much pushback from the ad that I released and the abortion issue. People are staying quiet on that. I think a lot of it was disbelief at first. But when I talk to people regular, I see them out and they know who I am, and maybe they want to talk a little politics. We agree on my platform. We do. But you always get, and I pull a lot of those voters. I beat top of the ticket, which was Joe Biden, by 1,000 votes, in my county, which is pretty good. I do have that cross-party appeal. It was the first time I ran. A lot of people don't even know I'd gotten married, so my last name isn't even the same. So, I do have cross-party appeal in that regard. They all agree my platform, it's education, wages, and get this healthcare under control and get us a universal system so that we're not going broke with it and making a bunch of healthcare CEOs wealthy. It's a racket. It's theft. It's abuse. It's extortion. And now we're limiting healthcare of just women and just girls. No one's made any kind of legislation limiting healthcare for males. But Ohio, here we go. And when your elections are decided in primaries, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. And these people that are in our House of Representatives don't have the education, the social equity it takes to really understand people. We just had, if this isn't bad enough, we just had a representative, and my opponent, Rodney Creech, co-sponsored this bill. It is a bill to teach both sides of the Holocaust. Now, if that doesn't tell me you are not paying attention in school and you have issues,
so
I don't know what does.
So as an educator, explain to me what you think that looks like. What does the other side look like? I actually want to see that curriculum. I would like to see what the other side of that argument looks like.
I drew a simple Venn diagram and filled out the con side and asked my opponent to fill out the pro side. He says nothing. He says nothing. He answers nothing from me. The only way you're going to get an answer out of Rodney is if the media goes for it and he happens to answer, and you'll get something like some kind of spin. He will never answer anything directly because he doesn't really think. He's not the brightest bulb. He's a sucker for anything. He just goes for whatever. He was publicly schooled. And if he thinks it's a good idea to teach both sides of the Holocaust, I want to talk to his history teacher. And I taught in that district, but I don't know who his history teacher was.
Yeah, you hear this stuff and you go, it's almost unbelievable, but you go, I could expect that in places like, Mississippi, Texas. I could expect that in some backwaters, but Ohio? When did Ohio become the Florida of the Northeast?
My opponent, everything's been given to him. It's not like he had to get out there and sling drinks and wait tables or really have to deal with the grit of the real public. He was given land. He's got a business. He bosses people around. That's what he does. And he runs for office so he can get his health care paid for by taxpayers. So when, this is it. He has no reason to serve the public. He serves some weird, he loves Trump. So what does that tell you? He loves Trump. So
he bought the hat. You listen to the Rick
yeah.
Smith Show. We're here with Amy Cox. She is a candidate for Ohio's 40th Representative District. Her website, voteamycox.com. We'll get links out on social media. I can check that out and check out her agenda. Now, I did look at this Rodney Creech character, not somebody that seems all that bright, as you've pointed out, a go along, get along guy, whatever the leadership wants. That's kind of where he's going to go. Probably wherever the money goes, that's probably where he is. So, to differentiate yourself, you actually have a platform, don't you? You've actually got, unlike our Republican friends who said in 2020, we don't need a sticking platform. We'll do whatever the Orange Menace wants. You actually have some ideas on how to make lives better, how to help working people. Walk me through some of it.
Absolutely. It starts with education. Obviously, we need an educated workforce, and everyone, it's a right in this country. Everyone has a right to an equitable and quality education in this country. And they have not made certain of that in the state of Ohio for 30 years at this point with our funding system. So education, big push with that. Wages, big labor opponent. I've not lived one day of my life without the support of labor unions. I'm fourth generation union, starting with my great-grandfather, coal miner, and then my granddad built cars for General Motors. My dad was union school teacher. My first husband, union steel worker, second husband, union iron worker, and then I've been a union teacher up until a couple years ago, but now I'm part of a co-op, a worker co-op. So all about labor, all about the left in that regard. But this country wasn't worth a piss to live in until the labor movement. Hear me again. This country was not worth a piss to live in until the labor movement. We had child labor, women, what were women doing? Working in sweatshops? People were working 16-hour days. No, this country didn't have a solid middle class and an American dream until the freaking labor movement. And hello, wages. Until we start bringing up wages and get this second Gilded Ages butt kicked, we're stuck here. So all about that. And obviously healthcare is a human right. When your population isn't healthy, that's a national defense issue. Clearly people aren't healthy in this country. That's why we have, the gun violence that we have. People aren't getting healthcare. They're not getting resources that they need, and we're not investing in them. We're just not. We haven't since Reagan.
Right.
So
no, you're right on. What we've done is we've taken the resources that we would have invested in people, in families, in communities, and we've given it to a wealth class that is second to none. We've built the largest, most prosperous wealth class in the history of civilization, and we've done that at the expense of opportunities for our children, investments in our infrastructure, and investments in our future. And at some point, I'm hoping that these divisions, and I keep talking about this because we're pitted against each other, sliced and diced up in little groups and subgroups, right, left, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, however you want to slice and dice that, gay, straight, male, female, however, we're pitted against each other. So we're eating each other and never looking up at the corporate boardrooms and the greed class that keeps robbing us blind, Amy. And that's until we change that dynamic, until we start going after the right enemies, if you will, nothing's going to change.
No. And to follow up on that, I get that we have corporate Democrats and we have corporate Republicans, but by and large, the Republicans have given the American dream to the 1%, and they have literally taken it from the middle class. All you got to look is at the wealth transfer. Trillions of dollars. We had a leg up when COVID was here. What did they do? They took it right back. We're right back.
Yeah. No, you look at the argument that they're making about inflation. It's because Joe Biden gave $1,600 to everybody. That's what caused the inflation.
No, it wasn't. It's corporate greed. All you have to do is look at corporate profits. But when you live in a silo of information or a bubble, you don't see that. So you walk around ignorant of what's going on.
So the last question I've got for you is, how do we help? How do we get Amy Cox elected in the 40th district there in the Ohio House of Representatives? Because we need more folks like you. We need more angry, militant folks who are going to step forward and fight to make lives better. Outside of going to voteamycox.com, what do we do?
You can go to voteamycox.com, and if you scroll down, you'll see a donate link. We have some great media and commercials or ads, whatever you want to call them. We have more in the bucket that we are about to throw out as well. We are going to do some billboard ads and whatnot, but I am not in a hugely competitive district, which gives me the freedom to sort of put myself out there and be a little brazen with things. And I'm comfortable here. I'm comfortable being a little more authentic and not being tied to, a box. But if you donate to our campaign, the more money we have, the more media and the more eyes that we can push those ads on internet. And if we get enough donations, we'll obviously put this on TV because everybody's asking for it.
No, look, everyone needs to, and I keep saying this, every district in this country, every House race, every state Senate race, every congressional district has to have someone out there speaking the truth out there, holding someone accountable, especially when you're talking about someone with a record as bad as Rodney Creech.
Yeah. And you're just scratching the surface.
Just scratching the surface. The website, voteamycox.com. I hope you'll check that out. If you got a couple of bucks, donate. All going to a good place. Amy, I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts. Bring some more firebrand with you. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much.
Great talking with you, Amy Cox. Again, the website, voteamycox.com. Make sure you take a look at that. And as I said, maybe a couple of bucks going to the website to help that campaign get the message out. I love her. And if you check out the videos, I wanted to play some of them, but check them out. Trust me, you'll love it. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, question, comment? Jump in. Again, I look at this story about the 10-year-old, and immediately Republicans push back. No, that Democrats making that up. No. And you would think, even, I'll tell you the first time I heard about it. I heard it in rebuttal. It was a Republican who was saying that, it didn't exist. It was one of the Ohio people coming out and saying it's, this is nonsense. I got it in an email. And because I literally get hundreds of emails from Republicans with their talking points and, hey, send us money. And I remember reading it and I'm going, here's the thing. Even if it's not 100% true, the premise is something you should be angry about because it's possible. It's plausible. Now, at that point, I didn't know it was true, if it was true or false or what was going on. All I know is I got this email saying, the Democrats are making this stuff up. And immediately I'm repulsed by the story and angered, as everyone should be. But the first spin that Republicans immediately came out with, before the news really even picked it up, was that it's all nonsense. So don't believe it. And then I started getting emails from people going, no, they're just making this up. So the first spin is what the minions took. Instead of waiting for the facts to come out, waiting for reality to come out, the first spin was denial and then attack. And this is the Republican MO. This is what they do. This is what the outrage machine does so masterfully. And when they have the kind of power in the media that they have, the kind of control that they have in the media, this is what you get. Instead of, the visceral reaction being to a story about a 10-year-old being raped and getting pregnant, being outraged at the rapist, being outraged at a system that doesn't care about this 10-year-old, being outraged at a system that is going to force a 10-year-old to have a child. Instead of being outraged at those things, we're being pushed in a direction, no, be outraged at something else over here. And deflection is something the outrage machine on the right does masterfully. It's always giving you someone else to hate, always giving you a target, and it's always politically in their favor. For instance, gas prices, perfect example. Joe Biden doesn't have a switch in the White House that controls gas prices. Doesn't. Just like George Bush didn't, just like Barack Obama didn't, just like Donald Trump didn't. But you had idiots running around with stickers, putting stickers on gas pumps going, Joe Biden did this. No conscious thought. In fact, I just had a relative text me a picture of, if you ate, thank a farmer. If you got goods, thank a truck driver. If you this, thank so-and-so. If you can't afford any of it, thank Joe Biden. Because it's all Joe Biden's fault. And I said back to this relative, I go, you're smarter than this. You know better than this. Or maybe you don't. This is good old-fashioned American corporate greed. And I got the response, well, I was just kidding with you. No. Maybe you in your in your head thought you were kidding, and maybe a lot of people think, oh, it's funny. But what it's doing is it's continually passing this stuff on and reinforcing it to where the dim don't know that you're just being funny. Where the dim they're not in on the joke because they're not very bright. And they take it to heart without thinking about, hey, corporate profits are through the roof. Gee, that's the invisible magical hand. But everything else is Joe Biden's fault. And this is where Democrats, again, they don't do messaging well. They don't tell the story well because they don't have the vehicles like Republicans have built over the last 50 years. And to their credit, look, from 1971 to this moment, they have invested heavily in infrastructure. From the Powell memo forward, they have invested in organizations that filter down messages in ways that Democrats haven't even thought of yet. The right is much better funded, much better organized, much better message. They're focus group tested, think tank approved. They're all on the same page. They're the herded cats. And that happens because the moneyed interests control them. It is the best democracy money can buy, and they despise working people. Because the people who control them are our captains of industry. They are our wealth class. They are our oligarchs. They are the wealth of this country. And they got that wealth by taking it from working people through lower wages, less health care, less retirement security, unsafe working conditions, you name it. Externalizing environmental costs. Look at our Supreme Court. Understand, these are folks who hate working people. And we had better come around to that reality, and we'd better do it quickly because time is running out. And we better get registered to vote. We better make sure we're registered to vote. We better make sure that they haven't purged us from voting, and we better get out and vote. We better do it in a way that helps working people and not harms us. Just my thoughts. Quick break, right back.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1993. That was the day that President Bill Clinton announced his Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. He had campaigned for president, promising to allow all citizens to serve in the military, regardless of sexual orientation. Once he was elected, there was a great deal of opposition to his proposal. Military officials railed against the idea of lifting the ban on homosexuals in the military. Members of Congress and the public voiced opposition. President Clinton proposed a compromise he called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This meant that military officials were not supposed to inquire about the sexual orientation of servicemen and women. Service members were not to be public about their sexual preference. This meant that if members of the LGBT community wanted to pursue a career in the military, they had to hide a significant part of who they were or risk losing their jobs. The policy stood in effect for nearly 2 decades. More than 12,000 officers lost their jobs because they refused to stay in the closet. It is also unknown how many more LGBT people decided not to apply for military service because of the discriminatory division. President Obama pledged to repeal the policy during his first election. It took 2 years after his election until Don't Ask, Don't Tell was finally ended by Congress. Some members of Congress issued dire warnings about repealing the discriminatory policy. But on the 5th anniversary of the repeal, President Obama issued this statement: "Today, Americans can serve the country they love, no matter who they love. And openly gay, lesbian, and bisexual men and women in uniform make our military stronger and America safer." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Although we haven't even gotten through this year's midterm congressional elections, it's still not too early to start examining some of the characters who hope you will make them president in 2024. I know you don't want to, but we must. That's because corporate elites have already chosen their favorites, and they intend to use massive sums of money, lies, more money, PR slickum, and even more money to slide their toady into the Oval Office, hoping you don't discover until it's too late that their chosen one really is a toad. Take Ron DeSantis. The GOP's far-right, power-hungry, narcissistic Florida governor promises to be the next Donald Trump, only more effective and not as nice. For example, his favorite gubernatorial hobby is the Orwellian practice of monitoring and censoring people's speech and thoughts, culling out ideas he deems objectionable. Don't say gay is his most infamous dictate to the state's teachers, but he has also outlawed any teachings that might, quote, denigrate the founding fathers. Nor will he tolerate the study of institutional racism in America. Indeed, he has even mandated that social studies textbooks, get this, must not include concepts of social justice. Ron adamantly opposes what right-wingers call a woke society. He wants one that's asleep, sound asleep. He recently rallied his right-wing cadre to ban some math textbooks. Yes, math. They screeched that some real-life topics like wage disparities are being used to make math problems relevant to today's students. So it was Fahrenheit 451 for those books. Thus far, DeSantis' censorship binge has nixed 42 math books for, quote, incorporating prohibited topics. This is Jim Hightower saying, did I mention that DeSantis is also forming his own gubernatorial military force? A state army he can deploy in emergencies. What's an emergency? He says he'll decide.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday we talked about the doctor who performed the abortion in Indiana and the OBGYNs across the country who have raised in excess of $100,000 to help that doctor. Because look, they're gonna need security, gonna need lots of around the clock protection from crazy. But now attorneys for that doctor, they are moving forward on a defamation suit against the Attorney General of the state of Indiana, this Todd Rokita, who evidently his comments that got us some national attention also got their attention, take him into court for defamation. And good. Maybe it's time we start holding these people accountable and going on the offensive. I find it completely offensive that this is even happening, especially when you're talking about a 10-year-old. This is the part that just... A 10-year-old. 10. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the issue, especially this... I'm just stuck at this. But I've asked our good friend Dr. Keith Pochek to come share some thoughts with us on, well, what this means for doctors, what this means for ER doctors. We've heard some horror stories, and it's only going to get worse in the coming weeks and months. Dr. Keith, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with this 10-year-old. Over the weekend, my daughter and I were taking a long car ride, and one of the questions she asked is, can a 10-year-old even give birth, and could they survive giving birth? And I'm like, I know a 10-year-old can get pregnant because that's how it works. But the whole giving birth process at that age, yes, deadly, fatal, what?
I think very dangerous, extraordinarily high risk. There are so many physiologic changes that occur with pregnancy, and a young, small body like that is not nearly as equipped to handle that. I mean, I think that, could it potentially progress to where maybe C-section could be performed somewhat safely, maybe in some instances. I think that, a lot of it's just an individual case. I think there are cases where, our development obviously is different across the spectrum of different people. So could it potentially happen safely? I imagine it could, but I think that it is by and large very, very high risk. I think the big takeaway I have from a lot of this is that, Republicans have this tendency to always claim the moral high ground for issues. And when something like this comes up, it reminds me that, don't ever cede them the moral high ground. Never. When they come out and say that a raped or abused 10-year-old should be forced to carry that pregnancy to term and deliver it at extraordinarily high risk to her own health and potentially put her at risk for death or other huge complications, don't give them the moral high ground ever, really on anything. When they come out and say that. And I think that we're as those on the left are apt to cede that moral high ground all too readily. And this is a case that highlights the fact that we really shouldn't do that.
No, I would say not even on the left. Those on the sane side. I mean, it's
Right.
insane to say that we're going to force a 10-year-old, to say it's an opportunity for a 10-year-old to have a child. A 10-year-old doesn't even know anything about us. And what are you going to do? How are they going to support that child? Oh, we're going to get them jobs? Well, yeah, of course, because that's the Republican agenda. Get those kids back into the mills. Get them back into the mines. We need the cheap labor, Keith.
Oh, exactly right. And then, if you're going to force teenagers or really young women to carry unwanted pregnancies to term and not support them, not give them paid maternity leave, not give them paid time off. What exactly are you asking them to do? I mean, you're asking them to basically go into poverty or deep into poverty and starve and or not be able to support their own child. It's just, and this is maybe, and I think maybe I saw this on, I don't even know, maybe Nicole Wallace or something was talking about it a couple nights ago. The Republicans now have, on this issue, have become kind of the dog who caught the car. And they're, so they won this huge victory. And now, what are they going to do with that now that a lot of the backlash and a lot of the cases and a lot of the real world occurrences are coming to light? The first thing they did is deny it. No, of course, this was a lie. This was made up. This wasn't really even a real story. And then a day later, no, actually, it was true. It really happened. So a lot of them are living in this this alternate reality that we've talked about on tons of other issues, where they don't even think things like this can happen, and they do happen. And so, the state houses should not be deciding the outcome of these cases or how they're going to go. It's only a matter of time until there's a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, I think, against a specific state when someone is denied life-saving care because their physicians or their hospital is worried about the risk and legal aspect of things.
Yep.
How that hasn't, I'm surprised it hasn't happened already, and it probably has, and maybe it just hasn't gone through the legal channels yet. But the family of the first woman who dies or has a horrible outcome of a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, which is non-viable, it will never be carried to term. So the family of that mother who suffers horrible damages or death just needs to go ahead and sue that state for I don't know, an exorbitant amount of money. I have no idea how much that's worth. And those cases are going to happen, and they're going to build up, and it's just going to increase the confusion. It's going to increase the division. It's going to cloud the picture even more than it's clouded already.
Let me ask you, you were an ER doctor. Yeah, I've said from the beginning this what they're saying in states. Well, for the life of a mother, you can act. This is a defense. This isn't a healthcare policy. This isn't after the fact, where now I assume as a doctor you've got to worry about someone then coming and saying, well, her life wasn't in danger, you made the wrong call, and now having to go through trials and having to go through all kind of stuff. Now it's a defense. It isn't a right. This, as an ER doctor, as someone, do you see it in kind of the same way, or is that a concern of yours? How do you view this?
Absolutely. I think that there are decisions that need to be made fairly quickly with sometimes limited information, and especially when someone is teetering or has is in shock, which for us in medicine means they're not perfusing their organs well, and maybe their blood pressure's low because they're losing blood. Or a few different reasons that could happen, and decisions need to be made very quickly. And of course, someone after the fact could come in and with all the information now available and an infinite amount of time to second guess and play Monday morning quarterback, could go through that case and say, well, you know what? Hey, actually, with all this information, it's clear that didn't actually need to happen on an emergent basis, or you acted prematurely. So absolutely. I mean, I think that the decisions need to be made between the clinician and the patient, and the clinicians need to give the patient the best information that they have at that time, and then together the shared decision needs to be made. And it doesn't need to be made in a courthouse. It doesn't need to be made at a Capitol building. It doesn't need to be made at a state house. It needs to be made right there in the exam room between the medical provider and the patient.
Do you remember during the whole Affordable Care Act fight, the dreaded Obamacare, how the right kept saying we need to get government out of between the patient and their doctor, that we should leave that alone, let the patient and the doctor decide. And remember all of that stuff? What happened to that?
I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, it just, and I'm not the person who thinks that like Civil War bullets are going to be flying between two sides within the next 10 years. But I think that this particular issue drives us further, if it were even possible, drives us even further and further apart. Red America and Blue America, and it's become that much more divisive of an issue now. And think about economically, and you have a daughter, and I don't know if she's heading into college or she's in college or whatever, but these sorts of things, and I have two daughters, these are going to affect their college choices. These decisions are going to affect where they go when they leave college. Of course, if you're now exiting college with a degree and you're going to be a young professional and you're single and you're out looking to potentially find your partner for life and are going to be out on that kind of scene, why in God's name would you go to Alabama? It's just
Ohio
or West Virginia or Ohio, or you could name a number of states that it's just, how could this potentially harm them economically? I mean, of course it's going to. And then we already talked about the brain drain that's going on in America. This is going to deepen it even further.
Yeah, this is not good. Now, again, there's a lot of anger, a lot of vitriol. There's talk of the president doing some executive order stuff. There's talk of some legislation. This is one of those moments where we seem to not be able to politically get anything done. This is going to revert back to states where Republicans have done so much better of a job of organizing and taking over, because we're seeing it across the country. They're banging out these abortion ban laws like they're going out of style. Yeah. It's going to get ugly quickly, and it's not going to take as long, I don't think, to see some of the really ugly negative effects. I'm looking at Kansas right now. Within a couple of days, there's going to be a vote to put it in their constitution. This is ugly times.
Yeah, and like any tragedy, any disaster, any poor policy decision, it's going to come down on the backs of the poor disproportionately, of course. And that's the real tragedy of it all. If you live in a state that has restricted or banned abortion and you're well off or well-to-do, of course you'll be able to get across state lines and get the procedure that you want or that you need to have done. But those who don't have the means are not going to be able to do that. And so that's it's just another one of those examples that starts with really any tragedy in history, but use the sinking of the Titanic as a prime example of which class you were in and who died and who lived. I mean, this is another one of the
you're absolutely right. And you look at the reality. The reality is, and there was just a story over at The Economist that pointed out that, we have a maternal mortality rate that is, second to none globally. We have the highest maternal mortality rate in the industrialized world. And now with this, they're saying it's only going to get much worse.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I guess it just kind of leads to, what do we do next? My state is in this purpledom, Virginia, North Carolina, stretches into Georgia, South Carolina, not so much, stays red. But, we're kind of hanging on a thread because right now abortion is still, is essentially unrestricted, and the laws haven't changed because we have a Democratic governor. And but as soon as the next election occurs, the majority party in the state legislature in North Carolina will introduce a bill to ban abortion, probably at 6 weeks plus, and it'll be whether or not the Dems have enough folks there in the legislature to uphold the veto of the governor, and it's going to come down to a few votes. And so this is going to play out in every 2 years across a lot of America, across a lot of purple America, and that's just going to add to the confusion that's already present. What's legal now and what's not, and you had folks from Texas going to Mexico to have procedures done the day after the Supreme Court decision, and the laws hadn't even changed yet. but those numbers went up tenfold or something like that. Folks going to Mexico to have these procedures done. So it's just like, what it's going to do to rank and file Americans and, working Americans and working women in particular. And it's a tragedy. Hopefully this can help rally us, for the elections coming up in the fall.
No, and that is the hope, that people get registered, make sure they're registered, and actually get out to vote in November, and make this part of the reason they get out to vote. I know it is activated a number of people that I know, and that's a good thing. But Dr. Keith, I appreciate you taking some time sharing your expertise and your knowledge on this. Not a good topic.
No, unfortunately not. But hey, that's how we're going these days. But hopefully we can continue to draw some inspiration to go out and protect the folks who need us.
There you go. Our good friend, Dr. Keith Pochek. Thanks so much for your time. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1848. That was the day the Convention on Women's Rights began in Seneca Falls, New York. The organizers of this convention brought together some of the leading women's activists of the day, such as Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucretia Mott. The meeting included numerous discussions on the role of women in society. Leaders presented a declaration of sentiments. It included a list of oppressions faced by women of the day. Several had to do with work and economic issues. For example, it noted that men monopolized nearly all the profitable employments, while women could earn only a scanty remuneration. It also declared he closes against her all the avenues of wealth and distinction, which he considers most honorable to himself. As a teacher of theology, medicine, or law, she is not known. Despite these limitations, many women, poor women in particular, were forced by economic necessity to work. By 1840, 8,000 women and girls as young as 13 worked in the New England textile mills. Women almost always earned far less than men. Female textile mill workers in Massachusetts had formed the first union of working women in the United States, the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association. Of course, the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention provoked scorn and outrage from many, especially men. A local newspaper wrote, "This bolt is the most shocking and unnatural incident ever recorded in the history of humanity. If our ladies will insist on voting and legislating, where, gentlemen, will be our dinners and our elbows? Where are domestic firesides and the holes in our stockings? Even today, women still earn less than men. For every dollar men earn, women only earn 78 cents.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Going to hit the email bag. Got an email from Russell. Rick, he says, Rick, I just started listening to your expletive show. I can't say that, FCC radio. And you, buddy, need to wake up to the reality that your boy Biden is seriously unpopular, even amongst the libs, and is going to be a total wipeout in November as voters go to the polls to throw your socialist, union-loving garbage out the door. The only hope for Dems is if they can cheat again and steal another election. Russell. Turn off the F channel. Seriously, turn off the F channel. I did ask Russell a number of other questions. He did not respond. He wanted to spew, which is par for the course. But I did want to throw this out because I think it's important. The frame that the right keeps throwing out is that Biden's horribly unpopular and the Dems are going to get wiped out. And I'm not so sure. You look at the latest generic ballot, the latest polling out by CNN and SSRS. They got it tied. The generic Dem Republican, it's 46 apiece. people are on the fence. And the reality is, and look, this is a tough election to figure out, because this whole Roe thing, the dog catching the car has kind of woken up a number of Republican voters, especially Republican women who always thought, no, that's just all fundraising talk. They're never going to really overturn it. No, it's like my labor friends who were like, no, they're never really going to attack collective bargaining and pursue, a national right to work strategy like the Janus decision in the Supreme Court. No, they're never really going to do that. They're never going to just out of thin air overturn decided law. They'd never do that. And yet they do. And they have, and they're going to more often. And it's going to get worse. And people are waking up to the reality that Republicans hate the 20th century and they want to repeal it. And there are going to be more people going, maybe Republicans aren't the right answer. We may not be thrilled with the Democrats, but they're bad. Those Republicans are much worse. In fact, as was pointed out in the most recent New York Times bit, they point out that, back in the 2018 midterms, when Trump was running, his disapproval ratings were through the roof. He won just 8% of the voters who disapproved of him. Whereas what they're saying right now is 19% of the people who disapprove of Biden are talking of voting for Democrats. That is a huge difference. And that could be the difference that keeps Democrats in power in the House. And it looks like they're going to win the Senate. They're going to hold on to the Senate and maybe even pick up a seat or two. But here's the reality, and this is where I agree. Some of the polling coming out is that neither party has the right priorities. Republicans, they're all about attacking the working class, all about attacking the 20th century, all about attacking progress. Democrats are stuck on a lot of the social issues and fighting the good fight over here without really focusing on how are we going to make lives better. We should be talking about reshoring manufacturing. We should be talking about rebuilding those manufacturing plants, because manufacturing is national security. We should be talking about education and healthcare and infrastructure, and we should be hammering on those things. Because Republicans are about none of that. Understand, we're in the mess that we're in because of conservative policies. All of the free trade agenda that the cons brought us and corporate Democrats brought us is why we're suffering in the way we are now. All of the attacks on education, all of the attacks on privatization, this is why we are where we are now. And we better wake up. And we better do it quickly. Now, interestingly enough, Herschel Walker did get through an entire 10-minute speech today without making a gaffe, without lying, without making up another weird story, without claiming he was an FBI agent or started a business that doesn't exist or was valedictorian or any of those things. Now, again, there's a video going around from 2019 where he talked about being an FBI agent and told the story about how he grabbed a gun with the intent to kill somebody. This was the exact same event where he said that his favorite game was playing Russian roulette. This is a guy who wants to run because, of course, Russian roulette is competitive. Oh, gosh. This guy could be in the Senate because that race is getting closer. Scary times ahead, folks. Also, some good news. Donald Trump and Mike Pence are holding dueling events in Arizona. That is going to be fun to watch. Yeah. But to answer your question, Russell, I don't think it's going to be the bloodbath that you're hoping it is. I think your party gone crazy. And I'm hoping that there are still some sane, rational Republicans left who go too far, too much, too soon. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, podcast, wherever you get yours, you'll find us. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.